Hello, everybody. Hope you guys had a good Memorial Day weekend, remembering those who have fought for your right. Party. Mm. So, right now we're going back into CompTIA Security Plus. We're going to do explain privacy and data sensitivity concepts. All right. So, am I really in lesson 16? I thought I'd never get this far. Feels like it takes forever. Anyways, so explaining data privacy and protection concepts. Lesson introduction. If people are an organization's most important asset, which is often what they say, but sometimes they don't reflect that, then data comes a close second. So the rapid adoption of cybersecurity awareness and technologies has come about because of the huge reputational financial costs of high-profile data and privacy breaches. Oh, hello. So I'm sure you guys know about Facebook mining your data. Your data is worth a lot. The fact that we give it out freely is kind of a controversial topic right now. But there are some laws being put in place to help certain people in certain countries and states. So like California or European Union, they have laws protecting your data and privacy. So it is usually data that threat actors want and data that the whole system is set up to protect. So your files, your pictures, your video games, your whatever, that's all possible to be breached and information used against you. Your pictures might be blackmailed against you, or your systems could be hacked and then compromised, so everybody knows your dirty little secrets. All right. So the confidentiality, integrity, and availability security attributes of data processing and storage are ensured through a mixture of managerial, operational, and technical controls. TOM is the acronym that they use for that. You need to remember that. That is a question that is heavily brought up. Along with security, you should also be able to assess privacy factors when collecting and storing data and identify how processes must be shaped by legislative and regulatory compliance. All right. So, as a cybersecurity specialist, you're obviously going to be doing stuff that will possibly be used in court cases. If you tamper with an OS or you start hacking a computer that is part of evidence, the system may be considered compromised in a court of law, and then you can't use that as evidence against somebody. So you gotta be really careful about what you do and how you do it, because it'll be tough to use in court evidence if it's been tampered with by you as the cybersecurity professional. And they do go over what you should do in those instances. So we're going to explain privacy and data sensitivity concepts, explain privacy and data protection controls. Cool. So topic 16A, explain privacy and data sensitivity concept. Detailed understanding of privacy and data sensitivity concepts will help you to operate within an overall data governance team. Data security and privacy are areas where policy and procedure are as important as technical controls and ensuring compliance. These policies and procedures may also need to be expressed in agreements with external partners, suppliers, and customers. As a security professional, you will need to select and apply these policies, procedures, and agreements wisely. Is my volume up? There we go. Let's put that on.
As you manage data security, one thing to think about is the concept of data loss prevention, DLP. And effectively, you're talking about fancy backups, I suppose. But before I get too far ahead of myself, let me start and talk to you about the idea of compliance measures. There are so many different compliance type organizations and standards. I've listed a few here. PCI, for example, that's if you have an organization that work for an organization that takes credit cards, for example, you and your processes will have to be PCI compliant to even use credit card capabilities. If you work with an organization that contracts with any company that is a member of the European Union, GDPR is important. Many organizations require compliance to the NIST cybersecurity framework or to the global standard, the ISO 27001, 27000X standards. You get the idea. But data loss prevention is an important element of each of any of these particular standards. When it comes to data loss prevention, it's really easy to always be stuck in kind of conceptville. And what I thought I would do is kind of drop out of the PowerPoint slides here and get you onto the internet. I think many people will have a copy of, say, Office 365, for example, or you might have an opportunity to have a free account in any cloud provider, AWS, for example, or Google Cloud, doesn't matter. I encourage you to take a look at the idea of how these organizations or these vendors expect you to put data loss prevention solutions in place. For example, if you're going to take a look at data loss prevention and something like Microsoft Office 365 or something, you basically start looking at, well, where is the information that's really essential for email, for your Word docs, or for your spreadsheets or whatever. And you put in conditions, you identify conditions, and you put together rules and actions that are taken so that you can have data that is backed up, that is truly relevant to what you've been doing day in and day out. So I encourage you to take a look at what it means to put together, whether it be a data loss prevention policy. Now you're getting a little bit more into the conceptual idea, but what is your particular policy at an organization or even as an individual? You know, how can you set up a policy for yourself that says, okay, if something goes wrong, like my computer gets hit by ransomware and I can't access it anymore, what are some of the rules and conditions I can put in place for whatever documents I have or whatever service I do? If you're a blogger or something, how can you put together a policy that actually puts real triggers in place so that you can actually say, okay, yeah, I've lost something, but each time I've worked, I've triggered some form of backup. I've figured some form of way to make sensitive information that changes a lot or needs major backup will always be backed up. And again, there are various ways to do it, and I challenge you to take a look at whether it be, again, Microsoft DLP, or it could be in Amazon Web Services, the kinds of solutions that are put in place. That way, this concept will come very much alive to you, and you'll see the importance of it, not just in terms of complying to whatever standard there might be out there, but just keeping your data safe.
Privacy and sensitive data concepts. The value of information assets can be thought of in terms of how a compromise of the data security attributes of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability triad would impact the organization. When surveying information within an organization, it is important not to solely judge how secretly it might need to be kept, but how the data is used within workflows. For example, risk to confidentiality of public information is non-existent. The risk to availability, however, could have significant impact on workflows. Data must be kept securely within a processing and storage system that enforces CIA attributes, which is super important. We need to remember confidentiality, integrity, and availability. That is the core ethos of what cybersecurity is. In practice, this will mean a file or database management system that provides read or rewrite access to authorized and authenticated accounts or denies access otherwise by being encrypted. For instance, as distinct from the security requirement, you may also need to consider the impact of privacy in shaping data governance. Privacy versus security. While data security is important, privacy is an equally vital factor. Privacy is a data governance requirement that arises when collecting and processing personal data. Personal data is any information about an identifiable individual person, referred to as the data subject, where data security controls focus on the CIA attributes of the processing system. Privacy requires policies to identify private data, ensure that storage, processing, and retention is compliant with relevant regulations, limit access to the private data to authorized persons only, and ensure the rights of data subjects to review and remove any information held about them are met. An information lifecycle model identifies discrete steps to assist security and privacy policy design. Most models identify the following general stages. Creation collection. Data may be generated by an employee or an automated system, or it may be submitted by a customer or supplier. At this stage, the data needs to be classified and tagged. Distribution use. Data is made available on a need-to-know basis for authorized uses of authenticated account holders and third parties. Retention. Data might have to be kept in an archive past the date when it is still used for regulatory reasons. Disposal. When it is no longer needs to be used or retained, media storing data assets must be sanitized to remove any remnants. Information management is a massive task. Any organization, most schemes focus on structured data, that is, information that is stored in a directory hierarchy and subject to administrative access controls. Managing and classifying unstructured data, emails, chat sessions, telephone calls, and so on is an even more daunting task, even though software solutions designed to tackle this problem are available. Data roles and responsibilities. A data governance policy describes the security controls that will be applied to protect data at each stage of its life cycle. There are important institutional governance roles for oversight and management of information assets within the life cycle. Data owner, a senior executive role with ultimate responsibility for maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information asset. The owner is responsible for labeling the asset, such as determining who should have access and determining the asset's criticality and sensitivity, ensuring that it is protected with appropriate controls, access control, backup, retention, and so forth. The owner also typically selects a steward and custodian and directs their actions and sets the budget and resource allocation for sufficient controls. Let's see. Data steward. This role is primarily responsible for data quality. This involves tasks such as ensuring data is labeled and identified with appropriate metadata, and that data is collected and stored in a format and with values that comply with applicable laws and regulations. Data custodian. This role handles managing the system on which the data assets are stored. This includes responsibility for enforcing access control, encryption, and backup recovery measures. Data privacy officer. This role is responsible for oversight of any personally identifiable information assets managed by the company. The privacy officer ensures that the processing, disclosure, and retention of PII, personally identifiable information, that is pretty commonly used. That in the military, they use that acronym a lot. But yeah, basically, it's anything that social security number, date of birth, your name. I mean, they would even consider medical stuff as PI, your medical history, all that stuff. Anyways, complies with legal and regulatory frameworks in the context of legislation and regulation. Protecting personal privacy, the following two institutional roles are important. Data controller, the entity responsible for determining why and how data is stored, collected, and used, and for ensuring that these purposes and means are lawful. Data controller has ultimately responsibility for privacy breaches and is not permitted to transfer that responsibility. Data processor, an entity engaged by the data controller to assist with technical collection, storage, or analysis. A data processor follows instructions of a data controller with regard to collection or processing. Data controller and processor tend to be organizational roles rather than individual ones. For example, if widget.foo collects personal data to operate a web store on its own cloud, it is a data collector and data processor. If widget.foo passes aggregate data to grommet.foo, asking them to run profitability analytics for different customer segments on its AI-backed cloud, grommet.foo is the data processor acting under the instruction of widget.foo. Within the grommet.foo and widget.foo companies, the data owner might take personal responsibility for lawful performance of data controller and processor functions. Or if Facebook decides to sell your information to the highest bidder. Anyways, data classifications. Data classification and typing schema tags tag data assets so that they can be managed through the information cycle. A data classification schema is a decision tree for applying one or more tags or labels to each data asset. Many data classification schemas are based on the degree of confidentiality required. Public unclassified. There are no restrictions on viewing the data. Public information presents no risk to an organization if it is disclosed, but does present a risk if it is modified or not available. Confidential, secret. These classifications are also used in the military, so no, it's not. So yeah, unclassified data the public can see. Confidential, secret. It's sensitive, but for viewing only by approved persons within the owner organization, possibly by trusted third parties under a non-disclosure agreement, which I definitely had that back when I was in the Navy. I had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. We called it page 13. Basically, the page 13 stated if I divulged any of the information, I would be sent to Guantanamo Bay, was the gist of it. But yeah, so the idea is hey, this is stuff that could possibly destroy your country, or it's information that the enemy could use against you. It's kind of idea. So just certain things like that. Anyways, critical top secret is the information is too valuable to allow any risk of its capture. Viewing is severely restricted. So top secret data would be really important information that deals with how they perform operations, and it's something that is specific to so the top secret data would be a specific, very specific way in which a very critical operation operates. So spy boat, and I never got top secret clearance, so it was kind of weird because I was put onto the Jimmy Carter, but didn't have top secret. So there were certain places I couldn't even go, which was weird. But yeah, it's a really big deal. You can't get into those areas. They'll be what are you doing? Anyways, another type of classification schema identifies the kind of information asset. Proprietary information or intellectual property is information created and known by the company, typically about the products or services that they make or perform. IP is an obvious target for a company's competitors, and IP in some industries, such as defense or energy, is of interest to foreign governments. IP may also represent a counterfeiting opportunity. Movies, music, and books, for instance. Private personal data. So you guys work with this a lot. This is all your stuff. Private personal data, information that relates to an individual identity. Sensitive. This label is usually used in the context of personal data, privacy sensitive information about a person could harm them if made public and could prejudice decisions made about them if referred to by internal procedures, as defined by the EU's General Data Protection Regulations, GDPR. So this is only in the EU right now, and if you're in the United States, your data is up for free game unless you're in California. California is the one where you can demand to know what your data was used for, and it has to be done within a certain amount of time. And if it's not, then you can go to court and get money. Sensitive personal data includes religious beliefs, political opinions, trade union membership, gender, sexual orientation, racial or ethnic origin, genetic data, and health information. So it's pretty good, pretty in-depth there. Data types. Type schema applies a more detailed label to data than simple classification. Personally identifiable information is data that can be used to identify, contact, or locate an individual. A social security number is a good example of PII. Others include name, date of birth, email address, telephone number, street address, biometric data, and so on. Some bits of information, such as a social security number, may be unique. Others uniquely identify an individual in combination. For example, full name with birth date and street address. Some types of information may be PII depending on context. For example, when someone browses the web using a static IP address, the IP address is PII. An address that is dynamically assigned by the ISP may not be considered PII. PII is often used for password reset mechanisms and to confirm identity over the telephone. For example, PII may be defined as responses to challenge questions such as what is your favorite color pet movie. These are the sort of complexities that must be considered when laws are introduced to control the collection and storage of personal data. Customer data. Customer data can be institutional information, but also personal information about the customer's employees, such as sales and technical support contacts. This personal customer data should be treated as PII. Institutional information might be shared under a non-disclosure agreement, placing contractual obligations on storing and processing it securely. Personal health information or protected health information refers to medical and insurance records, plus associated hospital and laboratory results. So here they've basically separated PII into PII and PHI. I never saw the PHI designation. I'm sure this is more recent, which makes sense. PHI may be associated with a specific person or used as an anonymized or de-identified data set for analysis and research. An anonymized data set is one where the identifying data is removed completely. A de-identified set contains codes that allow the subject information to be reconstructed by the data provider. PHI trades at high values on the black market, making it an attractive target. And in fact, the health industry is finally picking up on this. They are looking at, there's a lot of cybersecurity jobs opening up for the health industry because they're starting to realize how big of a problem that is. They're trying to do no harm, and because they're not keeping their servers and all that stuff up to date with that, and they've been really lacking on cybersecurity. There's been a lot of fraud, and so instead of doing no harm, they're doing tons of harm without even realizing it, because they basically leave all this sensitive data out for hackers to get, and hackers are using it. They don't care. They don't care about your grandma who has some type of medical issue. They want to use it against your grandma to try and rip her off. So PHI data is extremely sensitive, and its loss has a permanent effect. Unlike a credit card number or bank account number, it cannot be changed. Consequently, the reputational damage that would be caused by a PHI data breach is huge, and that's why they're really upping their security. It's just kind of sad that it took them so long to kind of figure that out. Financial information refers to data held about a bank and investment accounts, plus information such as payroll and tax returns. Payment card information comprises the card number, expiry date, and the 3-digit card verification value. Cards are also associated with a PIN, but this should never be transmitted to or handled by the merchant. Abuse of the card may also require the holder's name and the address the card is registered to. Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard PCI DSS, which we talked about earlier, and so did James. They basically define the safe handling and storage of this information. Government data. Internally, government agencies have complex data collection processing requirements. In the U.S., federal law places requirements on institutions that collect and process data about citizens and taxpayers. This data must be shared with companies for analysis under strict agreements to preserve security and privacy. So every time you try and check your Equifax or whatever, all that information is being sent to them. So your credit score. I'm gonna take a quick break, guys. I'm gonna leave this open so you guys, if you want to read ahead, you can. I need to use. All right. Let me just take a break. Be back after these messages. Let me get up and stretch. Let's see. It's a lot. All right. Oh, so I don't know if you guys noticed, but I got a better chair. Say goodbye to this chair. Oh, dude, I was sitting on this chair for probably like, I don't know, hours at a time, and it was rough. No back support. Now I got some back support, although it's not quite good for the neck. My neck kind of hurts, but doesn't hurt as bad. So I'm super stoked. Yeah, so I got my wife a Secret Labs Titan House Stark chair. Dude, that is a nice chair. The only thing I had a problem with for me, because I'm taller, I was like, I kept hitting my head on the edge of the top of the headrest, and so that kind of annoyed me. So I think if I would get one, I would probably get a Titan. I don't know. It's just a little pet peeve I have. But yeah, wow, really nice chair. Would recommend. If you're, so I'm 6'5", so if you're probably 6'4" or less, like I think it would be a pretty good chair. I've seen some videos where the guys are like, oh yeah, I'm 6'5", and like I like it, but for me, like the most annoying thing is I hit the headrest edge and it's not comfortable in that aspect. But everything else, oh, dude, it is smooth. I am not endorsed by them, but yeah, I like it. It's really good. All right. Anyways, sorry, I'm getting distracted. I'm just so happy I have a chair that doesn't kill my back like that wooden chair. Privacy notices and data retention. So data owners, which is all of you guys all have data that you own, should be aware of any legal or regulatory issues that impact collection, processing, and personal data. The right to privacy, as enacted by regulations such as the EU's General Data Protection Regulation, means that personal data cannot be collected, processed, or retained without the individual's informed consent. Again, this is in the European Union, so if you're in the States, you don't have this. GDPR gives data subjects rights to withdraw consent and to inspect, amend, or erase data held about them. So you as the personal data owner, you do have rights if you are in the European Union or California. Right now, that's kind of like the only places that are really covered. So I think that right will eventually become more prevalent as more people start realizing how important their data is. Privacy notices. Informed consent means that the data must be collected and processed only for the stated purpose, and that purpose must be clearly described to the user in plain text language, not legalese. This consent statement is referred to as a privacy notice. Data collected under that consent statement cannot then be used for any other purpose. For example, if you collect an email address for use as an account ID, you may not send marketing messages to that email's address without obtaining separate consent for that discrete purpose. Purpose limitation will also restrict your ability to transfer data to third parties. Impact assessments. Tracking consent statements and keeping data usage in compliance with the consent granted is a significant management task. In organizations that process large amounts of personal data, technical tools that perform tagging and cross-referencing of personal data records will be required. A data protection impact assessment is a process designed to identify the risks of collecting and processing personal data in the context of a business workflow or project, and to identify mechanisms that mitigate those risks. Data retention. Data retention refers to backing up and archiving information assets in order to comply with business policies and/or applicable laws and regulations to meet compliance and e-discovery requirements. Organizations may be legally bound to retain certain types of data for a specified period. This type of requirement will particularly affect financial data and security log data. Conversely, storage limitation principles and privacy legislation may prevent you from retaining personal data for longer than is necessary. This can complicate the inclusion of PII in backups and archives. Data sovereignty and geographical considerations. Some states and nations may respect data privacy more or less than others, and likewise, some nations may disapprove of the nature and content of certain data. They may even be suspicious of security measures such as encryption when your data is stored or transmitted in other jurisdictions, or when you collect data from citizens in other states or other countries. You may not own the data in the same way as you'd expect or like to. So data sovereignty refers to a jurisdiction preventing or restricting processing and storage from taking place on systems do not physically reside within that jurisdiction. Data sovereignty may demand certain concessions on your part, such as using location-specific storage facilities in a cloud service. For example, GDPR protections are extended to any European Union citizen while they are within the European Union or European Economic Area borders. Data subjects can consent to allow a transfer, but there must be a meaningful option for them to refuse consent. If the transfer destination jurisdiction does not provide adequate privacy regulations to a level comparable to GDPR, then contractual safeguards must be given to extend GDPR rights to the data subject. In the US, companies can self-certify that the protections they offer are adequate under a privacy shield scheme. Geographical considerations. Geographic access requirements fall into two different scenarios. Storage locations might have to be carefully selected to mitigate data sovereignty issues. Most cloud providers allow choice of data centers for processing and storage, ensuring that information is not illegally transferred from a particular privacy jurisdiction without consent. Employees needing access from multiple geographic locations, cloud-based file and database services can apply constraint-based access controls to validate the user's geographic location before authorizing access. Privacy breaches and data breaches. A data breach occurs when information is read, modified, or deleted without authorization. You want to know that. Read in this sense can mean either seen by a person or transferred to a network or storage media. A data breach is loss of any type of data, but notably corporate information and intellectual property, while a privacy breach refers specifically to a loss or disclosure of personal and sensitive data. Organizational consequences. A data or privacy breach can have severe. Sorry, guys. I don't know why, but I'm always just so tired. I didn't do anything. All right. Data breaches cause widespread. So reputation damaged, right? Data breaches cause widespread negative publicity, and customers are less likely to trust a company that cannot secure its information assets. So I don't know if you guys heard about the SolarWinds hack, but that was everywhere, and they lost a lot of reputability through that. Their reputation was damaged big time. Identity theft. If the breach data is exploited to perform identity theft, the data subject may be able to sue for damages. Unfortunately, that is a big thing going on right now. A lot of people are getting their identity stolen, so you want to watch out. Fines, legalization, legislation, will empower a regulator to levy fines. These can be fixed some or in the most serious cases a percentage of turnover. IP theft, the loss of company data can lead to loss of revenue. I don't know if you guys looked into Micron getting their stuff stolen, but they did get their stuff stolen from China. This typically occurs when copyright material, unreleased movies, and music tracks is breached. The loss of patents, designs, trade secrets, and so on to competitors or state actors can also cause commercial losses, especially in overseas markets where IP theft may be difficult to remedy through legal action. Notifications of breaches. The requirements for different types of breaches are set out in law and or regulations. Requirements indicate who must be notified. A data breach can mean the loss of theft or theft of information, accidental disclosure of information, or loss or damage of information. Note that there are substantial risks from accidental breaches if effective procedures are not in place. If a database administrator can run a query that shows unredacted credit card numbers, that is a data breach, regardless of whether the query ever leaves the database server. Escalation. A breach may be detected by technical staff, and if the event is considered minor, there may be a temptation to remediate the system and take no further notification action. This could place the company in legal jeopardy, and any breach of personal data and most breaches of IP should be escalated to senior decision makers, and any impacts from legislation and regulation properly considered. Public notification and disclosure. Other than the regulator, notification might need to be made to law enforcement. Individuals and third-party companies affected by the breach know publicly through press or social media channels. For example, the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act, HIPAA, sets out reporting requirements and legislation requiring breach notification to the affected individuals. the security of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and if more than 500 individuals are affected, to the media. Requirements also set out timescales for when these parties should be notified. For example, under GDPR, notification must be made within 72 hours of becoming aware of a breach of personal data. Regulations will also... Sorry, guys. Will also set out disclosing requirements or the information that must be provided to each of the affected parties. Disclosure is likely to include a description of what information was breached, details for the main point of content, likely consequences arising from the breach, and measures taken to mitigate the breach. GDPR offers stronger protections than most federal and state laws in the U.S. Like I said, GDPR is really good for the people, but the U.S. doesn't really have anything that strong, which tend to focus on industry-specific regulations, narrow definitions of personal data, and fewer rights and protections for data subjects. The passage of the California Consumer Privacy Act has changed the picture for domestic U.S. legislation, however. Yeah. All right. Data sharing and privacy terms of agreement. It is important to remember that although one can outsource virtually any service or activity to a third party, one cannot outsource legal accountability for these services or actions. You are ultimately responsible for the services and actions that these third parties take. If they have any access to your data or systems, any security breach in their organization is effectively a breach in yours. Issues of security risk awareness, shared duties, and contractual responsibilities can be set out in a formal legal agreement. The following types of agreements are: so service level agreement, a contractual agreement setting out the detailed terms under which a service is provided. This can include terms for security access controls and risk assessment, plus processing requirements for confidential and private data. Interconnection security agreement, ISAs. Interconnection security agreements are defined by the NIST's Security Guide for Interconnecting Information Technology Systems. Any federal agency interconnecting its IT system to a third party must create an ISA to govern the relationship. An ISA sets out a security risk awareness process and commits the agency and supplier to implementing security controls. Non-disclosure agreement. Legal basis for protecting information assets. Non-disclosure agreements are used between companies and employees, between companies and contractors, and between two companies. So I've signed NDAs for different things. Navy, private company, Screen, Micron. You don't talk about their specific things that can get you, that can basically hurt them for gaining money or for protecting a country, kind of stuff. Let's see. If the employee or contractor breaks this agreement and does not share, and does share such information, it may face legal consequences. Yeah, like going to Guantanamo Bay, or a fine of like whatever they want to make. So if you do sign an NDA, just kind of careful about what you say about whatever it is. So NDAs are useful because they deter employees and contractors from violating the trust that an employer places in them. Data sharing and use agreements. Under privacy regulations such as GDPR or HIPAA, personal data can only be collected for a specific purpose. Data sets can be subject to pseudo-anonymization or de-identification to remove personal data. There are risks of re-identification if combined with other data sources. A data sharing and user agreement is a legal means of preventing this risk. It can specify terms for the way a data set can be analyzed and prescribe the use of re-identification techniques. Hooray! I got some knowledge. The activity, privacy and data sensitivity concepts. What is the difference between the role of data steward and the role of data custodian? Data steward basically looks over the data, and the data custodian goes through and verifies that it's in proper order. Data steward role is concerned with the quality of data, format, labeling, normalization, and so on. The data custodian role focuses on the system hosting, the data assets, and its access control mechanisms. I'm just going to go with no. What range of information classifications could you implement in a data labeling project? You can do public, unclassified, confidential, secret, and then top secret data for a range of classifications. One set of tags can indicate the degree of confidentiality, public, confidential, secret, or critical, top secret. Another tagging schema could distinguish proprietary from private and sensitive personal data. I didn't get that personal data aspect right, but I did get the other part. What is it meant by PII? Personally identifiable information means information that can identify a person via social security number, date of birth, address. See, personally identifiable information is any data that can be used to identify, contact, or locate an individual. You're reviewing security and privacy issues relating to a membership database for a hobbyist site with a global audience. The site currently collects account details with no further information. What should be added to be in compliance with data protection regulations? Currently collects account details with no further information. They have to say what they're using that information for, I think. Site should add a privacy notice explaining purpose of the personal information is collected and used for. So kind of the form should provide a means for the user to give explicit and informed consent to this privacy notice. Kind of. You're preparing a briefing paper for customers on the organizational consequences of data privacy breaches. You've completed sections for reputation damage, identity theft, and IP theft. Follow the CompTIA Security Plus objectives. What other sections should you add? So we've told them. Add a non-disclosure agreement. Wait, no, for customers on the organizational consequences. IP theft, identity theft, reputation damage. I'm honestly not too sure where they want to go with that, because they're talking about theft, reputation damage, identity theft. Like we talked about that, but I don't remember the fourth one. Data and privacy breaches can lead legislators or regulators to impose fines. In some cases, these fines can be substantial. Yeah, no, I didn't get that right at all. Yeah, no. All right. Explain privacy and data sensitivity concept, performance-based question. Small retail organization has a substantial amount of data. As a security consultant, the organization just hired you to review and make recommendations on the proper roles and management of their data. Since this is your specialty, you will review and determine data types and assign the appropriate roles. A data steward who is responsible for data quality. So a data steward. Identify databases requirements. There is private data available to internal users only. There is public data available to external users. There's personally identifiable data. Inventory is available to anyone. Sales data should not be available to consumers. An online catalog is available to consumers. Human resources employee data is sensitive. Identify whether an organization role is required for more securely managing a data type. Excuse me. User interviews. IT department will assist with data quality and ensuring data is labeled and identified with appropriate metadata. The Human Resources Director will oversee any required data regulations. The Sales Department will manage sales and the catalog databases by maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The Human Resources Department will manage the employee database by maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability. The Operations Department will manage the inventory database by maintaining confidentiality, integrity, and availability. All right, let's do this. All right, so for the catalog database, we want to make it public. Operations. All right, so that sales database is private. Sales. Put IT on that as the privacy officers. Yeah, organizational roles required. Well, we want sales to be able to do stuff on it. So, yeah. Oh, that is definitely private. Data owner. I would say that's more human resources. Inventory database, that's public. Cool. That was rough. All right, so data owner. Did I get all those right? I thought the inventory we were trying to make public. What? I'm confused. Okay. Data owner, a senior executive role with ultimate responsibility for maintaining the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the information asset. Data steward. This role is primarily responsible for data quality. This involves tasks such as ensuring. Did I get anything right over? Oh, no. All right. Such as ensuring data is labeled and identified with appropriate metadata, and the data is collected and stored appropriately. Data privacy officer. Only the employee database contains PII. Human Resources will assign a data privacy officer to this database. An organizational role will be assigned to assist in handling the secure data type in accordance with regulations. Inventory database. The database is available to all, so it is public and private. Okay. Operations will take ownership of the inventory database. IT will act as the data steward. This data does not. Wow, it jumped. Oh, there we go. That's why. Hey. All right. Data privacy officer, PII. Organizational role. This role pertains to data that requires regulations to protect personal privacy. All right. So for the catalog database, the catalog database is public as it is available to consumers. Sales department will assign someone to handle the catalog database as the data owner. IT will act as the data steward. This database does not require a data privacy officer or an organizational role. For the sales database is private as it should not be available to the public. The sales department will assign someone to handle the sales database as the data owner. IT will act as the data steward. This database will not require a data privacy officer or an organizational role. All right. Employee database. The employee database is private as it is a database that, let's see, used by human resources and contains sensitive information. The human resources HR will assign someone as owner to the employee database. IT will act as the data steward. Human Resources will assign a data privacy officer to this database, and an organizational role will be assigned to assist in handling the secure data type in accordance with regulations. Inventory database is available to all, so it is public and private. Operations will take ownership of the inventory database. IT will act as a data steward. This database does not require a data privacy officer or an organizational role. Hooray! Explain privacy and data protection controls. Policies and procedures are essential for effective data governance, but they can be supported by technical controls too. As a security professional, you need to be aware of the capabilities of data loss prevention systems and privacy enhancing database controls and how they can be used to protect data anywhere it resides, on hosts, in email systems, or in the cloud. All right, we're going to go over data protection, but I got to run to the little girl's room. I got to run to the restroom. Let's see what we got here. What is this? Boom, 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 boom. Oh. Oh. You gotta stretch. You gotta do the stretch, guys. Oh. Let's see. All right. Okay, smoky. Sorry, guys. I just realized I did not take out the trash. I don't even know if it's trash today. Like, it should have been yesterday, but oh, let's see. Oh. There we go. Okay. Let's see the new schedule. We're June 1st. It's trash week. Yeah, so they had a holiday. Okay. Already open. I just got so discombobulated from Vegas. You know, they say what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. I would disagree, my friends. Oh, that is just a personal opinion. Is it? There we go. There we go. Now it's not. But I like leaning back too at the same time. It feels good. All right, so we're going over data protection, right? You want to keep your data protected. You don't want people to know everything about you. Data stored within a trusted OS can be subject to authorization and mechanisms where the OS mediates access using some type of ACL. The presence of a trusted OS cannot always be assumed, however. Other data protection mechanisms, notably encryption, can be used to mitigate the risk that an authorization mechanism can be countermanded. When deploying a cryptographic system to protect data assets, consideration must be given to all the ways that information could potentially be intercepted. This means thinking beyond the simple concept of a data file stored on a disk. Data can be described as being one of three states. There is data at rest. This state means that the data is in some sort of persistent storage media. Examples of types of data that may be in rest include financial information stored in databases, archived audiovisual media, operational policies and other management documents, system configuration data, and more. In this state, it is usually possible to encrypt the data using techniques such as whole disk encryption, database encryption, and file or folder level encryption. It is also possible to apply permissions access control lists to ensure only authorized users can read or modify the data. Access control lists can be applied only if access to the data is fully mediated through a trusted OS. Data in transit or data in motion. This is a state when data is transmitted over a network. Examples of types of data that may be in transit include website traffic, remote access traffic, data being synchronized between cloud repositories, and more. In this state, data can be protected by transport encryption protocols such as TLS or IPsec. With data at rest, there is a greater encryption challenge with that data in transit, as the encryption keys must be kept secure for longer. Transport encryption can use ephemeral session keys, data in use or data in processing. This is the state when data is present in volatile memory, such as system RAM or CPU registers and cache. Examples of types of data that may be in use include documents open in a word processing application, database data that is currently being modified, event logs being generated while an operating system is running, and more. When a user works with data, that data usually needs to be decrypted as it goes from in rest to in use. The data may stay decrypted for an entire work session, which it puts it at risk. However, trusted execution environment mechanisms such as Intel software, guard extensions, are able to encrypt data as it exists in memory so that an untrusted process cannot decode the information. Oh, data exfiltration. In a workplace where mobile devices with huge storage capacity proliferate and high bandwidth network links are readily available. Attempting to prevent the loss of data by controlling the types of storage devices allowed to connect to PCs and networks can be impractical. Unauthorized copying or retrieval of data from a system is referred to as data exfiltration. Data exfiltration attacks one of the primary means for attackers to retrieve valuable data, such as personally identifiable information or payment information, often destined for later sale on the black market. Data exfiltration can take place via a wide variety of mechanisms, including copying the data to removable media or other device of storage, such as USB drive, memory card in a digital camera, or a smartphone, using a network protocol such as HTTP, FTP, SSH, email, or instant messaging, chat. A sophisticated adversary might use a remote access Trojan to perform transfer of data over a non-standard network port or a packet crafter to transfer data over a standard port in a non-standard way. The adversary may also use encryption to disguise the data being exfiltrated by communicating it orally over a telephone, cell phone, or voice over IP network. Cell phone text messaging is another possibility. Using a picture or video of the data, if text information is converted to an image format, it is very difficult for a computer-based detection system to identify original information from image data. While some of these mechanisms are simple to mitigate through the use of security tools, others may be much less easily defeated. You can protect data using mechanisms and security controls that you have examined previously. Ensure that all sensitive data is encrypted at rest. If the data is transferred outside the network, it will be mostly useless to the attacker and without the decryption key. Create and maintain offsite backups of data that may be targeted for destruction or ransom. Ensure that systems storing or transmitting sensitive data are implementing access controls. Check to see if access control mechanisms are granting excessive privileges to certain accounts. Restrict the types of network channels that attackers can use to transfer data from the network to the outside. Disconnect systems storing archived data from the network. Train users about document confidentiality and the use of encryption to store and transmit data securely. It should also be backed up by HR and auditing policies that ensure staff are trustworthy. Even if you apply these policies and controls diligently, there are still risks to data from insider threats and advanced persistent threat malware. Consequently, a class of security control software has been developed to apply access policies directly to data rather than just the host or network on which data is located. Data loss prevention. To apply data guard, SHIP policies, and procedures, smaller organizations might classify and type data manually. An organization that creates and collects large amounts of personal data will usually need to use automated tools to assist with this task. However, there may also be a requirement to protect valuable intellectual property data. Data loss prevention products automate the discovery and classification of data types and enforce rules so that the data is not viewed or transferred without a proper authorization. Such solutions will usually consist of the following components. Policy server to configure classification and confidentiality, privacy rules and policies, log incidents and compile reports, endpoint agents to enforce policy on client computers, even when they are not connected to the network agents to scan communications at network borders and interface with web and messaging servers. Enforce policy, DLP agents scan content in structured formats, such as a database and a formal access control model, or unstructured formats, such as email or word processing documents. A file cracking process is applied to unstructured data to render it in consistent, scannable format. The transfer of content to removable media, such as USB device or by email, instant messaging, or even social media, can then be blocked if it does not conform to a predefined policy. Most DLP solutions can extend the protection mechanisms to cloud storage services using either a proxy to mediate access or to the cloud service provider's API to perform scanning and policy enforcement. Mediation is the action the DLP software takes when it detects a policy violation. The following remediation mechanisms are typical. Alert only the copying is allowed, but the management system records an incident and may alert an administrator. Block, the user is prevented from copying the original file but retains access to it. The user may or may not be alerted to policy violation. but it will be logged as an incident by the management engine. Quarantine. Access to the original file is denied to the user or possibly any user. This might be accomplished by encrypting the file in place or by moving it to a quarantine area in the file system. Tombstone. The original file is quarantined and replaced with one describing the policy violation and how the user can release it again. It is configured to protect communication channels such as email. DLP remediation might take place using client-side or server-side mechanisms. For example, some DLP solutions prevent the actual attaching of files to the email before it is sent. Others might scan the email attachments and message contents and then strip them out certain data or stop the email from reaching its destination. Some of the leading vendors include McAfee, Symantec, Broadcom, and Digital Guardian. A DLP and compliance solution is also available with Microsoft's Office 365 suite. Let's see. Get there. All right. Sorry, guys. I gotta go. I drank too much water. sorry guys, that took a long time. All right, so we're at rights management services. As another example of data protection and information management solutions, Microsoft provides an information rights management feature in their Office Productivity Suite, SharePoint document collaboration services, and Exchange messaging server. IRM, Information Rights Management, works with the Active Directory Rights Management Services or the cloud-based Azure Information Protection. These technologies provide administrators with following functionality: assign file permissions for different document roles, such as author, editor, or reviewer, restrict printing and forwarding of documents even when sent as file attachments, restrict printing and forwarding of email messages. Rights management is built into other secure document solutions such as Adobe Acrobat. Data minimization, privacy enhancing technologies. Data minimization is the principle that data should only be processed and stored if that is necessary to perform the purpose for which it is collected. In order to provide compliance with the principle of data minimization, each process that uses personal data should be documented. The workflow can supply evidence of why processing and storage of a particular field or data point is required. Data minimization affects the data retention policy. It is necessary to track how long a data point has been stored for it since it was collected and whether continued retention supports a legitimate processing function. Another impact is on test environments where the minimization principle forbids the use of real data records. Counterintuitively, the principle of minimization also includes the principle of sufficiency or adequacy. This means that you should collect the data required for the stated purpose in a single transaction to which the data subject can give clear consent. Collecting additional data later would not be compliant with this principle. Large data sets are often shared or sold between organizations and companies, especially within the healthcare industry where these data sets contain PII or PHI. Specific steps can be taken to remove the personal or identifying information. These de-identification processes can also be used internally so that one group within a company can receive data for analysis without unnecessary risks to privacy. De-identification methods may also be used where personal data is collected to perform a transaction but does not need to be retained thereafter. This reduces compliance risk when storing data by applying minimization principles. For example, a company uses a customer's credit card number to take payment for an order. When storing the order details, it only keeps the final 4 digits of the card as part of the transaction log rather than the full credit card number. A fully anonymized data set is one where individual subjects can no longer be identified, even if the data set is combined with other data sources. Identifying information is permanently removed. Ensuring full anonymization and preserving the utility of data for analysis is usually very difficult. However, consequently, pseudo-anonymization methods are typically used instead. Pseudo-anonymization modifies or replaces identifying information so that re-identification depends on an alternate data source, which must be kept separate. With access to the alternated data, pseudo-anonymization methods are reversible. It is important to note that given sufficient contextual information, a data subject can be re-identified. So great care must be taken when applying de-identification methods for distribution to different solutions. A re-identification attack is one that combines a de-identified data set with other data sources, such as public voter records, to discover how secure the de-identification method used is. Key anonymous information is data that can be linked to 2 or more individuals. This means that the data does not unambiguously re-identify a specific individual, but there is a significant risk of re-identification given the value of K. For example, if K is 5, any group that can be identified within the dataset contains at least 5 individuals. NIST has produced an overview of de-identification issues in draft form at the time of writing. All right. It's about lunchtime for me. I'm going to probably head out, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. So I will be back after lunch probably.